If there's one thing I've loved about playing Druid over the last 20 years, the Druid will be lent into massively when it comes to changes. From adding and taking away tree form every expansion, adding the Eclipse resource system in Cataclysm, feral DPS either being total garbage or total god mode, if you're a Druid, change is nothing new to you at all. The good news is almost every single change coming to us in Mist of Pandaria is 100% positive. From the death of most macros that you need to put you in a form to use an ability, like Dash, just hitting Dash or even Prowl will just automatically put you in cat form now. This might not seem like a big deal to you or to me because we're just used to having macros for everything that we need to shapeshift for, but to a new player they will appreciate this no doubt. The addition of Genesis, which is a brand new ability for Restoration Druids, where you can massively enhance the speed at which your rejuves will expire, basically meaning real fast burst healing, but we'll definitely talk about that more as we get into the top 10 changes rather than the teaser changes. Being able to actually turn into an Atonement Druid by using Dream of Cenarius, which is a level 90 talent. When you are a Resto Druid with this talent, your Wrath damage is increased by 20% and your Wrath spell causes a nearby ally to be healed for 100% of the damage done. So smashing through dungeons and being able to spam Wrath to do your healing for you literally makes you feel like a Druid who can Atonement heal like a priest. It's actually really cool. The addition of Heart of the Wild to completely change the role that you fill for its duration, because again, this is a level 90 talent with a pretty hefty 6-minute cooldown, but no matter what role you fill, when you use Heart of the Wild, if you're a Resto Druid that needs to tank for a minute, you can use this. If you're a balanced Druid that for some reason can't cast spells for a period of time, you can use this and go cat. I'll leave the possibilities for this up to your own imagination. Innovate being useful again to actually cast on other people because it's now based off of your spirit. Being able to go in cat form as a Resto Druid even outside of those periods where you're using Heart of the Wild, thanks to the addition of Killer Instinct where you get 100% of your intellect as agility when you're in bear or cat form. And even the fact that you get Primal Fury as all specs. So when you are in cat form doing a bit of damage as a Resto Druid, every time you crit, you're going to get double combo points. And if you're in bear form, when you crit, you're going to get extra rage. Specifically as a Resto Druid in Mr. Pandaria, you're going to have a great time with things like that, but also not having to pick and choose between some of those key abilities that you want. For example, in Cataclysm, Living Seed is a primary example where in Cataclysm you'll rarely take this talent outside of maybe healing Balrog in Firelands, because there are other alternatives that just work out better. Well, now you haven't got those big choices to make because pretty much all of the useful healing mechanics that you get in Cataclysm, you just get baked into your spec in Mist of Pandaria. Being able to glyph Stampede in Raw is a huge one as well, because this just means that you haven't got to go in cat or bear form to use it. You can literally be a Boomy or a Resto Druid not in cat or bear, and then using this glyph, it's not going to put you in cat and bear anymore, but still give the movement speed to everyone. That is also kind of thanks to Stampede in Raw having no resource cost anymore attached to it as well, which is just another added bonus. Sunfire for Boomies no longer changes Moonfire into Sunfire, instead now it's your second dot that you maintain, like you would ordinarily maintain Insect Swarm. Instead now you're maintaining Moonfire and Sunfire, and Insect Swarm's gone. Tranquility, along with many other healing cooldowns like this, has got a massive buff as well, because now it actually scales based on the raid that you're in. So if you're in a 25-man, this is now going to heal 12 targets, whereas if you're in 10-man, it still just heals the 5. But none of those have made my top 10 changes or additions to the Druid spec. Wait till we get out of this intro and into the proper video, which you're probably thinking, come on, hurry up, let's do it. Alright, let's do it. Straight away at number 1 then, has got to be Symbiosis. It should come as absolutely no surprise that this came in at number 1, because quite honestly, not only is it incredibly overpowered, it only lasted this one single expansion. As soon as we get into the Warlords of Draenor pre-patch, or should I say, if we get into the Warlords of Draenor pre-patch, this will be gone, so enjoy it while it lasts. It's a 1-hour buff that you can place on anyone as long as it's not another Druid. You'll provide that class with a Druid ability and you'll get one of their abilities in return. Now, while we don't need to go through this entire table on what you'll get and what they'll get, there are some particularly strong ones, like if you was to give a Shadow Priest Tranquility, that's an extra raid cooldown. If you was to put it on any of the tanks, they're going to get an extra personal cooldown, like if you put it on a Monk, you're going to give them Survival Instincts, which is a reduced version of Survival Instincts, but it's still a 25% damage reduction on a 3-minute cooldown. Even being able to give a Resto Shaman Prowl, so when they're in Ghost Wolf, they can actually now stealth around. Some of the options here are absolutely crazy, but in terms of raiding, being able to give your tanks an extra personal cooldown, or even getting something that's going to benefit the raid like Stampeding Roar from a warrior, Tranquility on a Shadow Priest, or on really heavy AoE fights, even being able to give DK's Wild Mushroom Plague, because this just puts a mushroom down on the floor and anything that comes near it is going to get the diseases from the DK. But let's be completely honest, we're not bothered about what we're going to give them, it's all about what we're going to receive. So some of the biggest ones that you're going to get from the classes would definitely be Anti-Magic Shell as a balanced druid if you was to put it on a Death Knight, as a Feral DPS being able to get Play Dead, which is Feign Death that you'd get from a Hunter, as a Resto Druid you can get Ice Block from a Mage, as a balanced Druid Cloak of Shadows from a Rogue. A really nice one as well, even though it's got a full minute cooldown, would be as Feral being able to get Redirect from a Rogue. This is if you needed to target swap quite frequently, but at that point you'd probably be better off putting it on a Warlock as a Feral Druid and getting Soul Swap so you can actually move your existing Rip and Rakes to new targets. I could sit and talk about these all day because there'd be use cases for almost all of them, but some of my favourites are definitely the ones that were mentioned, as well as Divine Shield as a Feral Druid, or even Dispersion that you can get from putting it on a Priest. It is just an absolutely amazing ability for every Druid spec, and once you're getting used to the fights and you understand which Symbiosis ability is going to be useful on each fight, you'll always be using it on the same classes. But it had to make number 1 just because of how unique it is. The next one at number 2 is the split between Feral Tank and Feral DPS. Now this can be seen in both positive and negative lights, because gone are the days where you can be a hybrid druid where in one spec you can tank and DPS. Now you really are a go-to tank or a go-to DPS. So if you still want to be able to do both, you will need dual spec and you'll need to run a bear spec and a cat spec. The good thing about this is you'll no longer feel like you're forced into being that off-tank role, because whoever's in that off-tank role would have to have a second spec which is DPS anyway. So this is why I see it as a positive, because it kind of gets you off the hook as being that go-to second tank. And Feral DPS in general does pump throughout the entire expansion, and even more so in Throne of Thunder once you get your hands on Rune of Reorigination, which I actually absolutely wanted to include this trinket in the list, but it didn't seem right talking about a trinket in a class change list. But overall, Feral Tank and Feral DPS go through a lot of changes, which we will be talking about later on through this video. Number 3 is going to be a real quick and easy one because it's just Ursol's Vortex. Now, Ursol's Vortex comes from a talent, and Mr. Pandaria is the first time Ursol's Vortex is introduced to the Druid, and it still exists today in retail. Because it's that good, and that's exactly why I want to talk about it, and exactly why it made the list over all of the initial changes that we spoke about in the intro of the video. Ursol's Vortex is on a 1-minute cooldown, and it conjures a vortex of wind at the destination location that reduces movement speed of all enemies by 50%. Now, the first time an enemy attempts to leave the vortex, winds will pull them back to the center of the vortex. This lasts 10 seconds and you can use it in all forms. Now, the reason this is absolutely great is for grouping mobs up. As a boomy, to be able to actually put an Ursol's Vortex down and then silence, so when someone tries to move out of it to get away from the solar beam that's silencing them, they're going to get pulled straight back into it. This is just amazing in both PvP and PvE because there's lots of situations where this is going to help you just group mobs up. You can even Ursol's Vortex and then knock them back to, say, interrupt them from casting, and then they're all going to get grouped back up immediately from the Ursol's Vortex. It's just an amazing ability and one that I personally hate playing without. There will be some situations where Mighty Bash or Disorientating Roar are better, but lucky for you, the vast majority of the time you'll find yourself using Ursol's Vortex. Number 4 is where we can talk a little bit about Feral DPS. What's basically happened with the split is Feral DPS has lost some of the survivability that you would get as a Feral Bear, and Feral Bear has lost some of the DPS utility or DPS output abilities that you would get as Feral Cat. Now, Feral, since they got Cat Swipe, has always been pretty decent for those bursty AoE situations, especially where you can Tiger's Fury and Berserk to just basically completely destroy a set of adds. But there's really very little consistency there, and as soon as you go up to a trash pack where you haven't got Berserk or you haven't got Tiger's Fury ready, the AoE feels pretty lackluster. Until now. The main reason for this is Cat now gets Thrash as well, which thrashes all nearby enemies, dealing immediate physical damage and periodic bleed damage. It also applies weaken blows, which we're not really bothered about as feral DPS, but it's still nice that it's attached to it even as DPS. Swipe now also deals 20% additional damage against bleeding targets, so while you've got Thrash up, your Swipe's doing 20% more damage, and Swipe now awards 1 combo point each time you use it. Now, being able to use Thrash for free when you get clear casting procs and increasing the amount of damage the bleed does by using Tiger's Fury beforehand, because Tiger's Fury still gives you a 15% physical damage increase, just makes that consistent AoE really strong. And even when you're under-geared as a feral druid doing things like 5-man heroics when you first ding, if you're using Dream of Cenarius really well, which we will get to soon, because funny enough, that makes my top 10, you're going to be absolutely blasting when there's lots of targets that you can make use of Thrash and Swipe spam with. Next up at number 5, we've got to talk about the most overpowered glyph, in my opinion, ever added to the game. Druids get Glyph of Efflorescence. Now what this does is causes your efflorescence effect to now be caused by your wild mushroom instead of by Swiftmend. As if that's not enough, it also increases the healing done by Swiftmend as well by 20%. Now why this is absolutely amazing is because you have basically a permanent efflorescence anywhere you want. But I can't just talk about Glyph of Efflorescence and the fact that you can have a permanent Shaman's Healing Rain essentially anywhere you want with an absolutely monstrous duration and almost no cooldown, but also now you make use of mushrooms, where up until this point it's just been for balanced druids and for dealing damage. Now whilst your mushroom's down and it's giving all that free efflorescence healing, it's also absorbing overhealing from your rejuve ability. It'll absorb all of the overhealing from your rejuve up to 200% of your maximum health. Now the great news is that even if you need to move your mushroom from point A to point B, it's not going to lose the bonus, and when you're ready you can use Wild Mushroom Bloom, which does a ridiculously big burst of AoE healing to everybody around it. And blooming it has only got a 10-second cooldown, and actually placing your mushroom and moving it around is only 3 seconds. Resto Druid, in my opinion, and remember it's very opinion based, is the most fun healer to play. It might not be the strongest or the go-to in like what people would consider a god comp like running Resto Shaman and Disc Priest, but Resto Druid in terms of output and in terms of enjoyment playing it, man, it is a lot of fun. But the fact that now you can just place a mushroom down and it does loads of AoE healing, and like I spoke about in the intro where you can then just be firing Wraths off to do atonement healing, it don't get much better than this. So we spoke about actually having good AoE as feral DPS at number 4, so at number 6 I want to briefly touch on the changes to feral tank. Firstly, your mastery just increases your armor by a flat amount now, meaning you can really get your physical damage reduction extremely high compared to other tanks. Where before this would increase the absorb from Savage Defense has now been completely redesigned. It's on a 9-second recharge and has 3 charges, and increases your chance to dodge by 45% for 6 seconds. Now this does cost 60 rage, so it's expensive to use, but basically being able to give yourself 45% dodge whenever you need it is absolutely massive. You will see a common theme with tanks throughout Mr. Pandaria, that they can do pretty crazy self-healing, and Druid is no different. Where you'd be used to just getting big absorbs from Savage Defense, with that being changed now, Frenzied Regen is a completely different ability. It's on a 1.5 second cooldown, which is basically just the GCD, and it instantly converts up to 60 rage into up to 35k health. So now you've got a choice to make between either healing yourself with Frenzied Regen or putting Savage Defense up to get the dodge. But that's not it. In Talents as a bear, you can also take Dream of Cenarius. Now this increases the healing that you do with Healing Touch by 20%, the critical strike chance of Mangled Bear by 10%, and your Mangled Bear crits have a 40% chance to make your next Healing Touch or Rebirth instant, free, and castable in all forms. Now this benefits from attack power instead of spell power, meaning you can do really, really big free healing touches on yourself, which once you've got loads of agility and you've got a lot of crit, you're going to be getting this go off quite a lot. So you're actually going to be better off maintaining a dodge as much as you can from Savage Defense and relying on Healing Touch to heal yourself, and in an emergency you'd be using Frenzied Regen. Now you're probably thinking, well, with Frenzied Regen changing, where do I get my maximum health increase cooldown from? Well, that's a completely separate ability now called Might of Ursol, and all Druid specs get access to this. It just puts you in bear form and increases your current and maximum health by 30% for 20 seconds. So you haven't actually lost that cooldown, it's just been moved out of Frenzied Regen into an ability on its own. One more addition you get is Bear Hug, which is on a 1-minute cooldown, and it stuns the target for 3 seconds, and each second it deals 10% of the Druid's health in damage. The Druid's immobilized for 3 seconds, and using this ability activates Bear Form. I must admit, that's a bit of a lackluster ability, but it is another tool in the Feral Tank's arsenal. But overall, Feral Tank is really fun. It doesn't put out the highest amount of single target or even AoE damage compared to some of the other tanks potentially, or at least from my experience. They are incredibly tanky, do crazy amounts of self-healing, and in my opinion, a lot more fun to tank in Mr. Pandaria on a Feral than it is in Cataclysm currently. A real quick one for Boomy is Astral Communion. Now, whilst it may seem a little bit lackluster, it's great for pre-pull, because what this does is communes with the Sun and Moon, granting 25 lunar or solar energy every second for 4 seconds, and this generates the power type most beneficial to you. So you can get within one cast of whichever eclipse state you want to be in before you pull, to very quickly be able to get into the state that you want. This can also be made better with a talent called Soul of the Forest, where you have an 8% chance to cause your next Astral Communion to instantly grant 100 lunar or solar power, depending on what one you need. Running Soul of the Forest, in my opinion, is not going to be the go-to talent for balanced druids unless anything new's found out that it actually sims better than the other two, but it does make for a fun rotation. When you get that proc and you know you can then instantly get into an eclipse state, it's pretty cool. But really, the most exciting thing about Astral Communion is the fact that you can use it before the pull to very quickly get in an eclipse state when all your trinkets proc and everything's up at the start. So we spoke about Feral being split into 2 specs, we've had a bit of an overview of what the Feral tank is, and we've also spoke about Feral AoE. But what about the cat changes in general? These cat changes have got to come in at number 8, purely because they don't only change your entire rotation, but there's so many minor things that I think just quick firing them all as my number 8 change is going to be the way to go. Firstly, one of the most important things as a Feral Druid is, of course, maintaining Savage Roar, because Savage Roar increases the physical damage you do by 40%, so you're not going to want to be putting Rip Up on a target with no Savage Roar, because it's straight away going to be 40% weaker. Currently, what you'll do is get at least one combo point up nice and quick to then use Savage Roar before you really start pumping in your single target rotation. Well, now you're going to have Glyph of Savagery, and Glyph of Savagery allows you to use Savage Roar with 0 combo points. Now, this only lasts 12 seconds, but it gets your entire DPS flowing before you need to worry about refreshing it. This is going to be absolutely amazing when you're questing from 85 to 90, or even at 90 going around doing dailies or just world activities, because you're going to have no attacks on a target that are going to do that 40% less damage, because you'll have Savage Roar up all the time. This is such a fantastic addition that I had to mention it. There's a few other minor changes, like Mangle no longer needing to be kept up on the target, so where Shred at the moment in Cataclysm benefits from having that bleed increase debuff from Mangle on the target, instead now the way Shred gets additional damage is just from when the target has bleed effects on them, which to be fair is basically Rend and Tear from Cataclysm just baked into the ability, because the same applies to Ferocious Bite, where Rend and Tear in Cataclysm gives your Ferocious Bite an extra 25% crit chance against bleeding targets. That's now just baked into Ferocious Bite as well. The same way the Blood in the Water talent is in Cataclysm, that's also just baked into Ferocious Bite, where if you use Ferocious Bite on something less than 25% health, it's going to refresh the duration of your rip. Now, the thing is, when it comes to debuff management, you've got one less to worry about because you don't need to keep Mangle up anymore, but even on single target, using Thrash with clearcasting procs is going to be a DPS gain. So you've lost one from Mangle, but you've gained one by keeping another bleed up, and it takes a bit more management because it costs 50 energy. So again, it's so expensive that you really want to be maintaining this by clearcasting procs. And now, quite honestly, the one ability that changes your entire rotation is Dream of Cenarius. While this is an optional playstyle, if you're wanting to get as much damage out as possible, this talent is non-negotiable. We already know what it does for Guardian Druid, but for Feral, it increases the healing done by your Healing Touch, and casting Healing Touch causes your next 2 melee abilities to deal 30% additional damage. Now, the way you're going to use this is in combination with Predatory Swiftness. So Predatory Swiftness gives you a 20% chance per combo point spent on a finishing move to make your next Healing Touch, Entangling Roots, Hibernate, Rebirth all become instant cast and castable in all forms. So playing around Dream of Cenarius and getting to around 4 combo points before you consume Predatory Swiftness, using Rake as the first ability to get to 5 combo points, and then Rip gives both your Rake and Rip 30% additional damage. On top of this, if you Tiger's Fury before it as well, you're going to get another 15% damage. And once you've got Rune of Re-Origination, which I showed you earlier, if you're lining all of that up and getting the trinket proc as well, your bleeds are going to be absolutely melting stuff. So the playstyle of Feral DPS, where you're having to manage in your clear casting procs, you're having to manage your instant cast heals to use them at the right time so you can get the most out of Dream of Cenarius, just makes Feral one of my most fun DPS classes to play, hands down. If I were to talk about purely fun and not output and said what is my top 3 favourite fun specs, Feral Druid would probably sit firmly in the top 2. And the only reason I'm not confidently saying number 1 is because I love Windwalker Monk. But overall, Feral DPS just gets some fantastic changes and you're going to love it. That was quite a long one, so I'm going to give you a really quick one, with number 9 being the addition of Ironbark. Now, Ironbark is Resto Druid only, but it's basically an external bark skin. It's got the same cooldown, being on a 1-minute cooldown, and the target skin becomes rough as iron wood, reducing all damage taken by 20% for 12 seconds. Quite honestly, there's not a great deal to say here, other than the fact that you're going to get a really good damage reduction cooldown for your tanks. Or for yourself, if you wanted to use Bark Skin first, Bark Skin goes down, you Iron Bark yourself, you're obviously just going to have a lot more cooldowns. But it's kind of been a long time coming for Resto Druids to have an actual damage reduction cooldown that they can put on other people. And finally, number 10 is for Balanced Druids. You get Celestial Alignment, which is a 3-minute big cooldown. Now, for all specs, this is not the only big cooldown you can get, because in talents you can also get Incarnation, which basically gives you a much more powerful version of the form that you're in. So for Feral, it's going to allow you to use abilities that normally require stealth, so namely this is going to be Ravage, because it also removes the positional requirements. For Balance, it's just going to flat out give you 25% increase to Arcane and Nature damage while you've got Eclipse active. For Guardian, it just takes all of your abilities and Growl down to a 1.5 second cooldown. And for Resto Druid, it's basically how you get your Tree of Life form back. But Balanced Druid has their own personal cooldown now outside of talents, which is Celestial Alignment. What this does is provides you with the simultaneous damage benefit of both your Lunar Eclipse and Solar Eclipse at the same time. It increases the damage done by your Nature and Arcane spells by 15%. And in addition, when you cast Moonfire, it also applies the periodic damage effect of Sunfire as well. When you activate this ability, it consumes all lunar and solar energy and prevents any from being gained during the duration. Now, this is part of the reason why Astral Communion made it into the top 10 earlier for Boomies, because on the pre-pull you can use Astral Communion to get one cast away from an eclipse, and then you can make use of that eclipse before you then pop Celestial Alignment. So you spend a big portion at the start of the fight under an eclipse state. Balanced Druid in general does feel very similar to Cataclysm, but just the addition of these couple of new abilities that have both made it into the top 10 make it feel like a much more versatile spec. I want to rewind for a second because in the intro I mentioned Genesis. Now, specifically for Resto Druids, when you use this, it accelerates all your rejuves, so they just tick really, really fast, and it feels absolutely amazing. When we was talking about the Resto Druid changes, where you can put your mushroom down to get efflorescence, and then overhealing is built into this, Genesis is a great way to be able to force overhealing into the mushroom to then bloom it, and whilst it is quite expensive, being like 9,000 mana, it is a fantastic way to just do so much burst healing, because you're going to have rejuves out on everyone, you're going to Genesis, which will probably top everybody off that have rejuve on them, and then all the overhealing is going to go into your mushroom, ready to bloom for big, big heals. And that's the Druid. As you could tell, I was quite excited talking about Druid because it is always going to be one of my favourite specs. But if you enjoyed the video, as always, be sure to like and subscribe. Check Rested XP out, especially if you've just come back to Cataclysm getting ready for MoP, because it's the fastest way to level. It is an affiliate link, so any guides you buy obviously go towards supporting me and the channel, which is much appreciated. And I'll see you on the next one.